Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivier Rouchon. I am Research Data Officer at CNRS, probably the largest research performing organization in France. I am Repository Manager at CNRS, but prior to joining CNRS, I spent 16 years as a long-term data preservation specialist in a national data center still in France. But I suppose that today I'm here with my other hat, which is the chair of the CoreTrustSeal. So this afternoon we will talk about certification standards, but I'll come back to that. But before we start, and on behalf of the presenters that you will see this afternoon, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today in Brisbane at the IDW, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. So, for those of you who were in the WDS session this morning, you already have heard about CoreTrustSeal and certification mechanisms. This afternoon, we will talk about OAIS as a standard because it's been revised this year. We will talk about the CoreTrustSeal again. We will talk about WDS and the Scientific Committee on Certification Standards, and we'll have some moments for questions and answers. But before we start, just a reminder of what the interest group is about. So the RDA WDS interest group on certification of digital repositories brings together all the stakeholders interested in the certification of data repositories. That means data repositories manager, like me, science publishers, research funders, scientists, and experts, to discuss issues related to certification within this interest group and try to provide guidance and recommendations to ensure the effective implementation of digital repository certification at national, regional, and global levels. So through the years, the interest group has focused on certification, building on the work of certification initiatives such as the Data Seal of Approval, such as DIN, ISO, such as ISC, WDS accreditation, and lately the CoreTrustSeal. The interest group offers a platform and a community to monitor and discuss developments in the area of certification. We have up to 220 RDA members in the interest group. And additionally, this interest group is also used as a kind of umbrella for several spin-off working groups, such as the Data Fitness for Use Working Group, the Trust Principles Adoption Working Group, etc. Okay? So, this is the framework, the existing framework for certification. So you can see 3 different levels, from the simplest to the more complex levels. What all these certification systems have in common is the OAIS standard, right? They're all referred to the OAIS. So just one quick question. How many of you are not familiar or don't know what the OAIS is? Raise your hand, don't be shy. So, right, okay. Well, so the OAIS is a standard now under the ISO umbrella, which defines 3 things. First, a glossary, a vocabulary, right? Defining what an archive is and what are the different actors within that ecosystem. It's also defined an information model, that is to say, the different layers between the digital object itself and the different additional information you need to properly understand and preserve the object. And it also defines a functional model, how an archive should be built and what the different functions it should include. It doesn't say how to implement those functions. It doesn't say how to implement the information model, but it says what at least the archive should provide. All right? So this standard, OAIS, has been included in the ISO standards. It's ISO 14721. And of course, in the ISO standardization, there are some revision processes. So the OAIS was published as a standard in 2005. There's been a first revision in 2012, and in 2024-25, it's been revised again. So in order to have a quick view on this revision, we asked David Giaretta to give us an update on this revision. So for those of you who don't know David, he's a kind of OAIS guru, right? He's the one who initiated the creation of this model through the CCSDS, Consultative Community on Space Data Systems, and ultimately ISO consultant as well. So David Giaretta, through his extensive experience in creating and managing scientific archives and leading numerous EU research initiatives in digital preservation, he has played kind of pivotal role in the development of international standards, and most notably the OAIS, and also the audit and certification standards, ISO 16363 and ISO 16919. It continues to lead the ongoing update of these and the development of other related standards. Building on this foundation, he has developed practical, coherent solutions and services to support repositories in achieving ISO certification while enhancing the value and security of their digital holdings. His organization, PTAB, offers comprehensive ISO-accredited ISO 16363 certification, which involves a process of continuous improvement, ensuring that repositories maintain the integrity, accessibility, and usability of their valuable information over time. So I will now kick the video.
Sorry I can't be with you today. My name is David Giaretta. I lead the working group that produced and updates OAIS and related standards. I've been asked to describe some of the updates that we made to OAIS, the latest version, but I've only got 5 minutes, so it's going to be very brief. The changes we made were to make it easier to align the description in OAIS with what repositories currently do, without changing the meaning and logic, just describe it more clearly. We wanted to describe existing concepts better because they were clearly being sometimes misunderstood. And then we introduced some new concepts to allow repositories to describe what they're doing more clearly. But there are still problems which I'll touch on at the end. So for easier alignment, what we did was, whereas previously we pointed things like provenance and so forth to the information object, now we say that the provenance, fixity and so forth apply to the data object. Now this is logically the same, but it's much easier to implement, and it's what repositories currently do. Then we re-emphasize that any information object, whether it's provenance, fixity and so forth, may be at any point the target of preservation. So you obviously need to preserve provenance as you go forward, otherwise you can't support claims of authenticity. And then we slightly generalize the definition of the information package, but of course it must still contain an information object. The changes to the existing concept to make them better understood, well, we expanded, made much more explicit what conformance meant. Unfortunately, people still do not read that section very carefully. We gave a lot more examples about representation information networks, and we described preservation techniques much more explicitly. Previously, it looked as if we were just talking about migration, transformation. In fact, if you looked at OAIS previously as a whole, then we were talking about all of these techniques, which are now clear. So the idea is that either, and we think this is pretty exhaustive, either at any point when you have to take some action, the content information may be kept by the archive, but it may have to be changed, or there might be reasons for it not to be changed at that particular point, legal reasons, for example. Or finally, it cannot be kept by the archive for financial reasons, resource reasons. So each of those gives you these three basic techniques. So you can either transform, not migrate, transform the data object, taking care of representation information, provenance to support authenticity and the transformation information properties. In the second case, we add representation information, only thing we can do. And that can be any type of representation information to ensure that that information trapped in the data object is independently understandable. And that, of course, includes emulation and all the other things. And in case 3, you really need complete archival information packages to hand over to the successor. So the new concept we introduced are ones which enable repositories to be clear to themselves as well as to others what they're doing. So in particular, their preservation objectives. So it allows the archives to provide a way to test whether they really have provided enough representation information for the information to be independently understandable. For example, are they just going to display the object, as you might do for an image, or are you going to be able to use it as data to reuse and to derive results from? For example, with a spreadsheet. This, with preservation objectives, the repository can be clear. It's not just left in a vague, everybody knows what we mean. No, it allows the repository to be extremely clear. So, but there are still some problems, and these are problems that the authors, can't really do much about. But we see when we look around that many people, maybe most, do not read the conformance sections. And what that means is that there are claims which are either false or at the very least misleading about products and solutions. Many, maybe most, people do not use the clear terminology that OAIS provides. Some use the term metadata, which causes just massive confusion, instead of the clear terms that OAIS provides. Others seem to use OAIS terminology. For example, many talk about information packages, but they clearly have not read or understood OAIS, and in particular they ignore semantics. So really they don't have information. And the result of this is that if this continues, rather, this misuse, misunderstanding of OAIS means that repositories cannot preserve the complex information which we're all being inundated with right now. And that's not necessarily terribly complex, that's even something as simple as a spreadsheet. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you'll email me whatever questions you have. Thank you.
All right. So for those of you who are interested to know more about this revision of the model, I forgot to say that we have collaborative notes available, and there's a link to the changelog of the OAIS revision, so you should be able to find more information there. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to discuss the CoreTrustSeal requirements revision and the community feedback we got over the summer on this particular subject. So you may all be familiar with the CoreTrustSeal. I mean, we discussed this already earlier this morning during a previous session. So the CoreTrustSeal is a certification framework for data repositories. It's built on 16 requirements on which you have to do a self-assessment, and then you are reviewed by peers and eventually granted the certification. These requirements are revised every 3 years. So current version is version 3, which runs from 2023 to end of this year, 2025. So we are currently revising these. Current version, version 3, had significant changes from the previous one. We have reordered a little bit the requirements. We have significantly rewritten some of these because they were a little bit ambiguous. And what we will try to do this time is to be as stable as possible and keep the changes to a minimum. So how does that revision process works? We, at the board, will review the application from the last 3 years and check the ones that have caused some problems in terms of ambiguity, misunderstandings, and things like that. And given those issues, we would suggest changes or addition to the requirements. That's really a community effort, which means that we will consult the community and get their feedback. We will not impose the change, we will just make sure that the community is happy with what we are proposing. So for that reason, we send out a survey in May this year, which closed in mid-August, I think, to get the feedback from the community. I'll show you the results of this survey later on, but the next step will be to incorporate this feedback into a new version that will be released by the end of this year and which will enter into force by the beginning of January next year for the next 3 years. Okay? So how did that survey happen? We managed to get something like more than 100 responses, 103 if I remember well. Just as a comparison, on the previous community survey we did 3 years ago, we had 180 responses, so it's not too bad. You've got the split by country and region here. You can see that there are lots of responses from Europe, which is not surprising because there are lots of EU-funded projects ongoing at the moment in Europe, and particularly 2 called Fidelis and Eden, for which objective is to roll out a network of trustworthy data repositories in Europe and globally. So they are particularly interested on this topic of certification. The second question that was asked in the survey was to try to identify the respondents. And the good thing is that we can see that not only the certified repository did provide feedback, but also others who are not necessarily repositories, not even certified, but have some special interest in certification. We asked them if they were considering the CoreTrustSeal. Some of them think that they are not in scope, but quite a significant number think that, say that they are in the process of preparing an application or preparing an application. So that's good news, because that means that we will have some work to do in the coming months or years. So, as I said, we try to keep the changes, the requirements as stable as possible, which means that there are no major changes in the requirement themselves, no reordering, no significant rewriting. The main change that we suggested is about the background information, and in particular, the level of creation. In 2023, the CoreTrustSeal issued a position paper on those levels of creation and preservation, and this position paper has been commented by the community and finally validated. So it suggested to change those levels, reorder them, and make active preservation the most important level, actually the one for which we would advocate as a certification body. So we have proposed to change the levels, actually reword them a little bit, change the order, change the numbering. So you've got here the percentage of agreement or disagreement that we got. So the good thing is that we've got a majority that are in favor of the change, but we have had some interesting comments. For example, that we should reverse the order to least curated to most curated, okay? And that we should stick to the numbering of the position paper. That's something that we had missed initially, but the position paper has been referenced in many projects, such as the one I mentioned earlier, Fidelis and Eden, and they will really use this position paper as a basis to identify the levels of curation provided by repositories. So it's very important that we stick to that numbering and ordering. So, I mean, that's no big deal to stick to that, and that's something that we will take into account. And also, we will use the extended guidance. The extended guidance is a document that we provide for applicants and reviewers, trying to give more information about what is expected for each and every requirement of the CoreTrustSeal. So we will give more information in that particular document. Then here are the different requirements for which we sometimes suggested some small adjustments or rewording. And you have the feedback that we got from the community. So basically what you can see that there's a vast majority of people that are agreeing with our proposed changes. The same goes with the digital object management. So on the CoreTrustSeal, we've got 3 different sections: organizational infrastructure, digital object management, and technology and security. So for each of these 3 sections, I have displayed the requirements and the feedback we got from the community. Here, there's just one that we could focus on. That's R8, because there's only 52% of the people that agreed on our proposed changes, but that was our fault because we did some mistakes in the writing, and it took us something like a month to figure out that there was a problem with the survey itself. So this has been fixed since then. And the same with the last section, information technology and security. So as you can see, there's a large consensus and acceptance of what we have proposed as changes. So what are the next steps? What we did is that we were 12 people at the board, and each of them has been assigned a criteria. So basically, each board member will finalize the processing of the feedback we received from the community. The application management tool will close by the beginning of November. So if you've got, if you are preparing an application, hurry up. You have 2 weeks left before the tool closes. We will publish the new version of the requirements in November or December. We will also release an updated extended guidance, and the version 4 of these requirements will enter into force on the 1st of January next year. All the application ongoing, which have already been submitted, will carry on with the current version of the requirements. It's only new application that will use this new version, so no worries. Right, that's me done with the requirements revision. So I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. Yeah, go ahead. Have we got a microphone?
Hi, I'm Petra Černohlavková from the National Library of Technology in the Czech Republic. Thank you for the update about all of this. I really appreciate that. I would like to ask you how you distributed the survey, because we have large initiative of building data repositories in the Czech Republic, and we would like to certify them as well. But kind of I didn't notice there is the survey going on. So
right. So we use the usual communication channels. First, our assembly of reviewers. We've got something like 70 reviewers for the CoreTrustSeal, and I suppose that themselves distributed the communication on their own channels. We also used the digital preservation distribution lists and things like that. It was also message on LinkedIn or other media.
Okay, thank you.
I think I was aware we were supposed to distribute the survey. I thought it was just for reviewers.
No. It was really open to the community. The wider, the better.
Sorry, I didn't do that.
No. We should have been more explicit, maybe.
Yeah, I'm a certified repository.
Well done.
Did the certified repositories get the notice about the? Because I don't think we got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We sent the communication on the assembly of reviewers.
Okay, so it was on
in
the
principle,
list.
certified repository have assigned a reviewer.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
I might have a suggestion to that because, for example, for the European repositories, the EOSC has newsletter going.
I think that was message on the Fidelis or Eden newsletter.
Okay, so I just didn't notice that. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. I've just got some questions about some of the numbers that you presented. And going back to the one where you had your 50 or so percent, 43%, I mean, you explained that there were comments saying about wanting to retain the ordering from the paper, etc. Did that explain all of that sort of like, that was quite a significant percentage against? Did that explain most of the reasons why people registered?
Yeah.
And the other one, I think...
And the problem is that on a survey, sometimes people disagree, but they don't say why. They just disagree.
No, that's fine. Just very conscious of Brexit votes, right? 52%, 48%. Was it really consensus? The other one was the governance one. That seemed to have sort of 53% in favour from what I remember from what you flashed up. I just wondered if there was... 52% yes, 36% no. I just wondered if there was anything that came back in the responses as to why that wasn't so convincing.
That was a mistake on our side.
Thank you.
Okay, no more questions? Right. So I will now hand over to Daniela, who is the program manager for the World Data System. She coordinates the subcommittee on standards and certifications. And if you were at the WDS session this morning, you've heard about the survey that she did on a community and the different recommendation that she built upon that, and she will give us more insight on these recommendations.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Again, my name is Daniela, Program Manager for the World Data System. Would like to start by thanking Meredith and Olivier for inviting me to present the work of the Subcommittee on Standards and Certifications here. I'm going to start by saying that I'm not going to present the results necessarily because we've presented those before, but I'm going to focus on the recommendations that came out of the work that was developed. And I would like to always start by introducing the mission of the World Data System for those that don't know that work that we do yet. We are a membership-based organization of data repositories. Our data repositories are our regular member repositories. We count with over 150 members in total. 2/3 of those are regular members, which means they are certified data repositories, so CoreTrustSeal certified repositories. And our mission is to enhance the capabilities, impact, and sustainability of those members. Why certification? So we know that repositories need to constantly evolve to keep track with evolving technology, integration with scientific workflows, data accessibility. And so to keep track into these evolving demands underscore their need for cultivating trust within the community. And certification can definitely play a role in fostering that confidence. So it builds trust with within the broader scientific ecosystem. Certification is usually done by a peer review assessment, which also aids in developing that trust. It provides alignment with evolving standards, especially with certification, recertification processes, so things need to evolve. It also demonstrates accountability and commitment to continuous improvement. There are several studies that also show that it mitigates the risk perception within the community, so they trust that the data that they deposit within those repositories is there for the long term. So the work that the WDS subcommittee done with standards and certifications, one of the pieces that was done there was to do a comparative analysis of different certification bodies. Historically, WDS has supported the development of standards for trusted repositories. Notably, WDS was instrumental in the creation of CoreTrustSeal itself. And we do require, as I mentioned, our regular members to hold CoreTrustSeal certification. And although we do acknowledge that CoreTrustSeal is a globally recognized certification framework and provides assurances for quality and sustainability of digital repositories, it is not the only certification body available. And so we looked at others to see if there were overlapping in the minimal requirements and see if we could expand WDS membership to include other certification bodies. As Olivier showed, however, CoreTrustSeal is one of the most approachable layers of certification. It has the least number of requirements within characteristics. But it just, after the comparative analysis that it was done, it doesn't necessarily make sense for WDS working with global repositories to be exclusive with CoreTrustSeal certification for membership. And so in this comparative analysis, as I mentioned in the session in the morning, and for those of you that were there, we saw that the main distinction is in the number of metrics within each one of those major categories that you see on the screen. But they share that same basis standards. The other piece of work that the subcommittee took was to survey the community regarding their certification practices and some of the challenges that they may be facing with certification. And as I mentioned again this morning, we conducted the survey with data repository representatives, had unfortunately not a large number of responses. We had 64, but they were globally distributed. And so in that survey, there were, here. In that survey, we could see that there was there were challenges that were common across most of the people that answered that survey. And those challenges are, always related with funding, of course. And they highlighted a whole other set of the challenges that we're not going to speak here again. We spoke about it the session this morning. But in general, we could see that there's still support for CoreTrustSeal as a certification standard. And they do not also, the community didn't want a proliferation of more certifications or standards. So they still support CoreTrustSeal as one of the main certification bodies. What else? Let me see. One of the main findings that we took out of one of the pieces of the survey and looking to see if we should or not accept other certifications to give access to WDS membership, there was a positive response in regard to that. So there were 55% of our respondents said that yes, we should be more open and include other certifications. The alternatives that were pointed out, there was not a whole lot of consensus on that, unfortunately. But anyway, based on the outcomes of those two pieces of information, the comparative analysis and the survey, the subcommittee developed a set of recommendations, and we have since then started thinking about ways that we can put those recommendations into action with the WDS community. So we are now going to present those recommendations and what the actions that we have been designing will be. So the first recommendation is to expand regular membership criteria. So WDS regular membership, as I said before, is requiring CoreTrustSeal certification. The recommendation that came out of the work of the subcommittee is to now extend that to globally recognized third-party frameworks such as CoreTrustSeal still, but also nestor seal and ISO 16363. And with this, we are trying to promote a greater inclusivity, accessibility, and diversity within those repositories that are within the WDS community. And some of those changes are going to be coming soon. We're just kind of announcing what were the outcomes, and we're going to be working and implementing these changes in the coming year. The second recommendation that came out of that subcommittee is to broaden the candidate membership eligibility. So at the moment, our candidate members were those that were working towards CoreTrustSeal certification. So they came on board as candidate members, and they had approximately 5 years to work through their structures and be ready for becoming certified. The plan would be to, or the recommendation would be to now change the eligibility for candidate membership and open that to those repositories that are able to report and do regular self-assessments that show that they are aligning with best practices and continuous improvement, but not necessarily seeking immediate certification. And with this, we aim to just lower entry barriers, but still maintaining commitment to rigorous standards. And we're trying to also be more inclusive of lower and middle income countries who sometimes don't have the means to acquire certification, but they do the self-assessment, sometimes even use the process of applying to CoreTrustSeal, but just as a self-assessment, not necessarily to then submit their application for certification. And so they would be eligible for this category of membership within WDS. The third recommendation is to strengthen funding agency engagement. So WDS's commitment, it has a commitment to proactive engagement with research funding agencies. We certainly think that funders have to play a role in providing resources, infrastructure, and guidance that enable repositories to achieve and maintain certification. And some of the ways that we are thinking that we can make this happen is to develop support materials, fact sheets, letters detailing membership value, but tailor those to funders so that our members can use documentation to then develop a value statement that makes sense to funders and maybe that way show their added value. We think that it would also be useful that to provide some training for repository staff on how to communicate those value narratives effectively. We've started working on this with a Delphi study that shows trying to get those essential elements that show how essential and valuable data repositories are, and then going to develop some narratives around those criteria to then use it to also sell that message to the funders. And so hopefully through that, we'll have more engagement with funding agencies. There are also initiatives that are working towards having these open systems that acknowledge the value of funders and those that are supporting repositories. And we are looking to engage with those and support their initiatives, hoping that that will also make a difference. The fourth recommendation from the subcommittee is to shift the stakeholder messaging. So to foster stronger engagement across researchers, funders, and policymakers, WDS advocates for a transformative shift in stakeholder messaging. So rather than relying on compliance-driven language tied to requirements, this approach, we hope, highlights the broader value of data sharing as a catalyst for scientific collaboration, transparency, and societal progress. And so in that way, we will frame repositories as essential infrastructures for co-creation and impactful research outcomes. So ways in we think that we could achieve this is by developing evidence-based narratives supported by success stories. And again, that Delphi study that I mentioned is contributing towards this. Also craft audience-specific messaging strategies that position shared data as critical asset for advancing science. And hosting workshops for data repositories on effective communication strategies that highlight the value, impact, and trustworthiness of their services. The fifth recommendation is to provide certification support, and this was one of the focal points of our previous session. So we intend to provide practical guidance to our candidate members throughout the certification process and advocate for cost-effective solutions for certifications. We are hoping that with this, we can ensure a more equitable access to repository certification. And ways to put this into action would be to collaborate with repository certifying bodies, and we already do that with CoreTrustSeal. We have a long-standing collaboration with CoreTrustSeal, and we hold meetings on a regular basis. And they do have specific banded fee structures for low and middle income countries, and we are hoping to make that more well known across the community and hopefully have more repositories in those regions of the world that don't have such easy access to certification to maybe promote them and have some incentives for them to seek certification. We also advocate for transparency in differentiated cohort applications. So again, these already exist, some of it. They are just not very visible. People don't really know about them. And then we want to develop and offer regularly scheduled training programs tailored to specific certification requirements, ensuring repositories are equipped with practical knowledge and resources. And the sixth recommendation is somewhat similar, but a little bit different from the previous one. So we think that one of the ways that we can have people seek certification and kind of ease the burden that is perceived in seeking certification might be to just have this community involvement and have people seeking certification and working through it together so they can support each other. And we saw from the session this morning that that can make a big difference. We had some 3 success stories of cohorts of certification, and that showed that value in having that community support and engagement in working through this process. We are also hoping to engage with funding agencies and involve them in this process and maybe have that incentive for them to now realize that, there's value in the repositories and they need to become more engaged and support. And so maybe they will also be more willing to have some funding specifically directed for cohort-based programs towards certification. And this is especially important for low and middle income countries. So with this, with these actionable recommendations that I just presented, we are hoping to expand membership eligibility, support candidate repositories, strengthen funding agency engagement, shifting the stakeholder messaging and provide certification support, and promote targeted funding for low and middle income countries. We hope to equip WDS and its members to serve as role models for best practices in data stewardship. As WDS works to advance these strategies, we're hoping that this shows that we are reaffirming our commitment to foster equitable, sustainable, and globally connected open science ecosystem where trusted repositories can thrive and drive scientific progress for societal benefit. And those are the recommendations. Thank you for your time. I welcome any questions if you have any.
Thank you. I have a question related to another type of repositories. We are speaking here about data repositories, but we have repositories with publications, reports, and theses and dissertations. And these want to be trustworthy as well and would like to be certified. For example, we are working on one on the national level. So do you see there any possibilities or some advice what we would take and getting the certification? Is there any possibility, or would you recommend different approach?
I'm not super familiar with how the certification for that type of repositories works. Olivier may be better placed to respond that question. Sorry.
Yeah, it makes little difference if it's a data repository or publication repository. So CoreTrustSeal, for example, is valid for both. We've got a perfect example in France where the biggest repository we have called AL, which is for publications, got the CoreTrustSeal certification this year.
Hello, Eric Laurie from the Australian Institute of Marine Science. I've got a sort of direct question about certification in general as a broad category. There's a lot of certifications that are applied in various professions where there's various strategies that, you know, you must be able to do this and this and this to be certified. But rarely is there any justification for those particular elements or any strong evidence that that certification actually aligns with the overall objectives of being actually good at that task. Here I'm thinking a lot of like AWS certification and various programming languages and stuff like that. I was wondering whether there's been any scientific investigations into the various elements that go into the certification, because obviously some parts are like no-brainers that you should be doing them. I was just wondering about the sort of the background in terms of the strengths of, by going through this process, it's like, oh yeah, that clearly helped this group and that led to this successful outcome because they went through this certification process.
Okay, how did we get to the CoreTrustSeal? That's the question, right? So basically in 2017, the WDS and another initiative called the Data Seal of Approval realized that they were doing pretty much the same thing using the same criteria. And we had a working group in RDA just to merge the two, because it was not really relevant to have two different certifications if they are the same, okay? So all this work was performed by digital preservation specialists. So that came from experts, really. So that's why we believe it makes sense, it's relevant for the community. Now, this certification is domain agnostic. It says what you should think about. It doesn't say how you should do it. It depends on your community, it depends on your research domain, and there may be some different implementations, right? So we just say, if you are a preservation repository, you should think about that. And then if you think about that, you should provide evidences on how you're doing it. Because certified repositories are trustworthy because they provide public evidences of what they're doing, right? So if you want to have examples, just go on the CoreTrustSeal archive and you will see the applications of certified repositories from your domain, and you will be able to have a look at it and maybe reuse or inspire, get some inspiration of what they've done.
I just also wanted to add that in universities where we have got generalist repositories, the whole question of certification is also helping us in terms of advocacy, because the issue of take-up or acceptance by researchers has been really an uphill struggle. And as we go to faculties to persuade them to participate, one new angle that we are bringing onto the table is the issue of trustworthiness of where the data sets will end up residing, that at least we have got this global recognition that we are doing things according to international standards.
I'm James Ennis from the British Oceanographic Data Centre. Are you starting to see a bit of a push from funders in terms of more of a stick of, if you don't have this, you can't get access to whatever, or you're not included in a round of funding or projects? Are you starting to see that at all?
Well, from funders, I'm not sure, but from research performing organizations or even at national levels, yes. For example, in France, we have an open science plan or policy which explicitly says that repository should target the CoreTrustSeal as a certification. And it's the same within CNRS, my organization. We've got an open science roadmap which says CNRS repositories should be certified by CoreTrustSeal.
Just advocate. I think we saw evidence earlier that it's helpful to be part of this. It shouldn't be a stick. It should be a carrot. But
if I may add to that, there's usually a more just a broad statement about you should deposit your data in a trustworthy repository, but the definition of trustworthy is not provided, right? So if you can show that you have that certification, then in terms of the funder, then the question is not there, right? Because you show that certification. So there's a value in just having that seal that you can just say, well, you ask for a trustworthy, this is certified. Which should be more than that, but...
I think that from the initial plan, we had quite significant amount of time for questions. So if you haven't got any questions about the presentation, maybe we could try to think about what you expect from this interest group. And what you would like to see in the coming years. Obviously, this interest group is used as a kind of technology watch forum. Initially, for example, we had hoped to add on the agenda an update on the nestor seal. Not sure if lots of people here are familiar with that certification framework. That could be something that we could present in a session to come. Now, I mean, we're open for suggestions. Yep.
With the update for the new version of OAIS, in our domain, we have the 1915 metadata standard that's used for cataloging into our repository. We have a mapping in our standard, ISO standard, and I'm just thinking it may need to be updated. Is there any thought for this community to assist with those sorts of, it's connected but it's not, I know, but those sorts of things about mapping to other standards, maybe to DCAT and those sorts of things, or do they already exist?
I mean, that could be something that we could envision. For example, I said during the introduction that this interest group was used as an umbrella for other working groups, such as the trust principles. And for example, in the trust principles working group, we did a mapping between the CoreTrustSeal and the trust principles. So if you are interested in doing something similar, well, let us know and we'll see how we can cope with it. Okay. More suggestions? Yeah.
Lynn Wilfrey, University of Cape Town. So my repository has the CoreTrustSeal, and we have we're members of WDS, and we had the earlier award as well. And so I was thinking about this mentoring thing which you mentioned. So we'd be happy because we know that some of the certified repositories used a lot of our the input that we gave to the CoreTrustSeal, and they actually approached me and said, "Thank you very much. We've used your application," and we'd be happy to mentor any African repositories that are interested in that.
Right. Yeah. Cool. I mean, we've had a very interesting session on the subject on Tuesday afternoon, I think, about the hurdles to certification in Africa and Asia Pacific, and yeah, that mentoring thing was something that was highlighted, and having a community, regional communities of practice or cohorts would certainly help to ease the certification for new repositories. Okay. Yep.
Thank you. Julie from Scholars Portal and Borealis in Canada. So in the session earlier today with the the cohort from the Canadian context, one of the things that happened after the cohort was developing a documentation suite with policy templates and an application template. And I saw in a CTS newsletter earlier that the board is looking at whether they're endorsing that or not.
Yeah.
But I guess in terms of developing resources and training materials for certifying a repository, does that fall more with the CTS board, or is that more something the interest group would do, or just anyone in the repository community? Is there sort of a coordination around that?
A bit of both, I would say. I mean, we are really grateful for the job that Borealis did. I mean, it's just a question of time and availability that we haven't endorsed your suite yet. because we are working on the requirements revision at the moment. So, but it's extremely valuable for the community to have such documentation suite. We are doing our best to produce some training materials or dissemination material, but producing these as part of the interest group could be another option. Yeah, so feel free to join the interest group and join us. Yeah, sure. All right. Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, Meredith, if you got any question, feel free to unmute and talk.
Thank you, Olivier. Hello, everybody. I apologize for not being there with you today. I'd first like to give my thanks to Olivier for running this session. I unfortunately was unable to travel. One item that I had put in the collaborative notes was the continued annual updates on certification frameworks. I think it's critical that we always maintain a space to give these updates. Even though they may not happen every year, if we don't have the discussion, people may not hear about it. I also, in the collaborative notes, included a link for individuals if you're not aware of how to join this group or how to get updates. Of course, sign up for the CoreTrustSeal newsletter, the WDS newsletter, but this certification of digital repository interest groups, join us. That'd be a great part of just receiving updates, getting access to surveys when they're released. It's another communication vehicle to share with what's going on out there. As always, thank you to CoreTrustSeal and to all of the people in the room for continuing this conversation. Certification's been studied since, I like to say, since the 1900s. So it's been around a while, and there's, that could be something else we talk about is the history of it. There's a lot of great speakers who can talk about the research that's done specifically on why certification is important, and maybe that's something we need to revisit. Olivier, I think it's been about 2 years since we've done that session, so maybe next year we could do that again.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Meredith. Any other comments? No? Well, in this case, I think that we can close the session a little bit in advance, so that will give you more time to grab a coffee before the closure of the plenary, right? Thanks again, and